but they're thrilled with the communication with these young people.
Now, it's very special to know the people who grow your food under any circumstances. I mean, it's like going to Taft Farms where you know your family, Paul. It's so different than, even though there are fine supermarkets in the area, it's so different to... It's anonymous there. You don't know who grew your food. But to know that the people who grew your food did it especially for you and without compensation, I think adds an extra dimension to the experience. What kind of commitment is involved from the members of the garden, the kids and their parents, who in many cases have to bring them there because they're too young to get there on their own?
Well, the one thing that I think that really makes Gideon's Garden work for the involvement of young people is that you're always competing with sports, camps, other activities. So there are certain times during the growing season that we announce that we're going to plant, we're going to do a big harvest, we're going to build scarecrows, we're going to have different events. Then the whole group comes. But the other times the people can come whenever they're not busy. They come at different times,
oh, okay.
So there's a flexibility. And what's important is to make sure when they come, they have something to do, that they go out in the garden and they do something, so that the feeling of the community is there, the feeling that the young people have really developed this, they're working together, and they bring friends. That's the other thing that happens.
So how do they know when it's not one of the major big organized activities where everybody needs to show up, when they can come at their own schedule and fit that in? How do they know what to do when they arrive?
Well, that's part of our family's involvement, is always making sure that we know what needs to happen.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that's important to stress with a farm, whether it's a half an acre or 500 acres, whether you're planting, whether you're weeding, whether you're harvesting, there is no job that's more important than any other job. And that's the part that's really important to communicate to the child. They might come and want to pick, but maybe it's already been picked. Well, that's the time when you go through and you see a weed that needs to be pulled, or if the plant needs water, food. There are no unimportant jobs, and they all have the same importance to the plant and to the garden. And that way no child ever feels left out. If they show up at 5 o'clock and just about everything's been done, that's what we'll take them over and we'll show them maybe how to water, how to feed, how to weed. And now most of the children that come know they can show up and they can go over to the garden on their own. And they already know what needs to happen just by looking at it, saying, oh, that plant shouldn't be there. This is a row of zucchini that's obviously not zucchini, and they'll go through and they'll weed it out.
You mentioned watering. We've had a rather dry season recently. How do you water there?
Well, fortunately, the location that we picked to donate to Gideon's Garden is right next to a house that we have on premises, and we'll just run a hose over and fill up a water bucket and go through, because in a small space, the half an acre sounds like a lot, but it's manageable. But you'll have tomatoes which need a certain type of water, and zucchini which need another type of watering. So that doing it with an actual can is easier, because you can give the plant just how much it needs, never too much, never too little.
And it's easier for a child to manage sometimes than a hose. That makes sense. So what type of crops are you growing now? What are some of the things out there in the field?
Oh, we have a lot. We have tomatoes and string beans. We have lettuce. We have summer yellow squash, zucchini. We also plant a lot of the winter squash, so that the season goes from June right through about the end of October, so that the child can experience the summer crops and the fall crops, and actually goes into some of the winter crops. So we have cabbage, we have butternut squash, acorn squash. We even put in, which they love, pumpkins. And later, when the children harvest the pumpkins, they can carve the pumpkins, they can paint them. And last year we took some up to BMC, up to the hospital, to the children there. We took some over to Fairview Hospital. And we try to, everything that comes out of the garden, part of the opportunity for the child is then to give it to someone, to be able to service something and to realize that they're really making a difference and making someone happy. And if you want to see a child that's not feeling well and another child shows up with a pumpkin and a carved pumpkin, it's a delight to see. And that both of those children, neither one of them will forget that experience of what happened. So we're growing all kinds of things in the garden, and we're hoping that our tomatoes turn out a lot better this year than they did last year.
Another thing that we
well, there was a blight last year. That wasn't your fault.
This year we also planted some ethnic, like tomatillos, poblanos, jalapenos. We had a very large Latino following last year. A lot of people coming to work in the garden, also a lot of people receiving from the garden. So we didn't want to just plant butternut squash and give them a butternut squash. We wanted to give them something from their own cuisine. So we felt that that was very, very important this year. And one of the focus that we had as Taft Farms in the beginning of the year when we were trying to coordinate what to plant in the garden, we wanted to do what would have the most benefit. So something like zucchini or squash that you'll get a harvest every 3 to 4 days throughout the entire season, as opposed to something like sweet corn, which is going to grow for 3 months and you get 1 ear. So yes, we planted sweet corn, and yes, we planted a lot of pumpkins and winter squash, but we tried to focus on beans, broccoli, kale, things that will offer multiple harvests and offer the most nutrition to the people who need it throughout the year.
Well, this is also exciting. For those of you who have just tuned in, you're listening to Religious Roundtable, and we're discussing Gideon's Garden, which is a mission of St. James Episcopal Church in Great Barrington. I'm Vivian Orlowski from South Berkshire Friends Meeting, the Quakers, and our guests today are
Francie Hills, St. James Episcopal Church. You can find us on the web at www.stjamesgb.org.
And Paul Tazinski from Taft Farms. You can reach us on our website, taftfarms.com, or we also do daily updates on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Taft Farms.
And I'm Penny Curry, business consultant to Taft Farms and a member of St. James Episcopal Church.
That's great. Francie, in a recent sermon, you observed that young people in Gideon's Garden and others whose lives they touch may be the quote-unquote real harvest. What do you mean by that idea? And could you tell us more?
I think Penny has pretty well talked about it, but young people are growing. They're learning new skills. They're gaining incredible confidence in themselves. And they also have a purpose. They're feeding hungry people. They're developing a sense of community with other youth that they might not know. There are some youth from our church, some youth from St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Stockbridge, but lots of other youth that are parts of other churches, or maybe they don't go to church, but they're part of Gideon's Garden. So it's a time to really develop a sense of community with other youth, also with the good people of Taft Farm, and with the wider community. And also, as Penny was talking about the great story of the delivery Thursday, developing even relationship with the people that we're feeding. So I think all of that. And also, the garden is bringing the Great Barrington Berkshire community together, I think, in a kind of a new way. Children, churches, private business, connecting with local community, youth, health and outreach organizations. I think that's kind of something new in our area. So all of that caused me to say that that may be the real harvest. Although if you go to the farm and look out on the field, that's quite a harvest there too.
Where does all this wind up in the community? You mentioned a couple of places already. Any others?
Well, we also have food available for any of the Breaking Bread kitchens that take place on Thursday night, sponsored and supported by the various churches and also some of the other organizations. I know the Rotary Club last year asked us for some food to help for their dinners, and they serve anywhere from 60 to 85 guests. And our young people at Gideon's Garden have an opportunity to not only plant the harvest, but they harvest the plants and the food, and then they deliver it to the Breaking Bread kitchen whenever St. James has its Breaking Bread kitchen. They help prepare the food, they help serve the food, and again, very important, they talk with all the guests. And I can tell you that last year we took about 9 of the children, And they loved serving the guests. And at each table, everyone was assigned to a table. And you could look over there and you could just see this communication happening. And when the dinner was finished, as the guests were leaving, they said, "Thank you so much for having the young people here and having them talk with us about what they're doing." So we know that that's very important. So that's another place where we deliver food, and we make it available to them. They call us about 2 days before, and then we package up the food, and they pick it up at the farm. So it's the People's Pantry, the Breaking Bread Kitchen. We also last year had between 11 and 15 families that came on their own to go to the garden, and we would harvest food for them once a week. And that went on for about half of the growing season. As word gets out in the Hispanic community, we are finding that more and more families will come and ask us. And everyone is so gracious and so respectful of the garden and just so appreciative. So word gets out in the community about what's available. And something that I think is very exciting that we're just beginning to have a communication with this week is with the community health program, program, the division of WIC, Women in Crisis. We are meeting with them to talk with their nutritionists about planning a field trip for their children to come to the garden to see the food. Then they have a cooking class on Thursday morning, and they cook the food. And we got very excited when we were talking about this because Michelle, the woman I'm meeting with, said, wouldn't it be wonderful if the children could see the garden, we could harvest some of the food, take it back, cook it in the cooking class, and for the children to really see hands-on where that food is coming from. And then they want to be able to tell some of the women that are involved in WIC that the garden would be available to them, and they would have an opportunity to come. So, and then, of course, as I mentioned before, the Railroad Youth Project, which we're very excited about, hoping to get them involved, and Simon's Rock will continue to be involved. So I think that, once you have that many organizations where word is getting out, you just have more and more come.